Becky here, and I'm assuming if you are watching this video, you are new to my channel, so welcome. If you're not new and you've just been watching and you've finally decided to dive into sewing, then welcome back. But if you are here, I'm assuming you are watching this video because you have decided to dive into sewing and learn how to sew. And that is a very exciting thing for me and for you. I just love meeting new people and bringing them into the sewing world. And sewing is kind of, like they say, like baking, where it really comes down to following the instructions, and there's different techniques and things like that in there. But with a little bit of practice, everybody can learn how to sew. And to get started, it really doesn't take much. So today we are just going to go over the materials that you need to start sewing. Now you may have some of these, somebody may have handed things down to you, you have no clue what they are, or you are just starting from scratch and you just said, I want to learn how to sew, and you need to know where to start. So I'm just going to go over today the basic tools that you need. Now, all of these tools you're gonna need forever. I still use them daily. There are, there's basic starter ones, there's cheaper ones, there's much more expensive options that if you decide to continue sewing, that you can always upgrade at some point. But these are all tools. I'm gonna show you things that, they're even things that I use currently, and kind of intermix them with some of the higher end sewing tools. So before we get started, why don't you head down to the comments and leave me a comment of why you want to learn to sew. Just for fun, you want to learn to make clothes for your kids, you want a hobby, just let me know down below. And also make sure you subscribe to my channel so that you're notified of future videos and you're notified when the next sewing lesson video comes out, if it's not out already. And also, I just wanted to add real quick that all of these tools, I will put a link down below. They're all accessible at Joann's. You can probably find most of them at Michael's, Hobby Lobby, even a Walmart, but they're also going to be on Amazon. And sometimes they're cheaper certain places. So I'm just going to throw a link down to everything on Amazon, and then you can kind of look and see where you want to purchase your items from. But other than that, let's get into it. All right, starting off with a bang here. The number one thing that you need is obviously a sewing machine. Now, this is the number one item there's a very basic items, and then there's very expensive items. Sewing machines can get up to tens of thousands of dollars depending on what you're looking for, or they can start at around $100. And this one is about 10 years old now. So when I bought it, it was about $80. I think now a similar machine is about $150. And this one was, I think I got it at Walmart. If you don't know where to start and you're looking for a machine, I do have a little guide that I will put a link down below that you can download to kind of look at different options of machines. It doesn't cover everything, but it's a great place to start looking for machines. And it kind of tells you what to look for in a beginner machine, which is what I would consider this. There's extremely beginner machines like the kids machines and things like that you really want to stay away from. I would say spend at least, unless you're getting it used or something like that, probably over $100 mark. It's going to be a decent machine. And there's also other ways to buy a machine than buy it new. A lot of times people have machines sitting in the back of their closets. You put a post on Facebook, hey, I'm looking for a machine. Even if it's old, the vintage machines are sometimes better than the new machines. And people will be like, oh, I have my mom's old machine that I'm never going to use. Do you want it? And you can get a machine that way. Or you could even look into your libraries here. At our local libraries, they have a special room that has all kinds of tools. There's sewing machines, there's sergers, there's 3D printers, all kinds of things like that. And during certain hours, you can go in and use those machines free of charge. That is another great way to find a machine. But like I said, I will link my little beginner sewing machine shopping guide down below if you want to check that out. Like I said, this machine I bought, well, actually my mom bought it for me when I was in high school. It is over 10 years old. I sew all the time on it. I have not upgraded my machine. This is a Brother, what is it? XL 2600i, and you can actually find these quite a bit used for around $50 still, or on Facebook. The number one thing is to make sure there is a presser foot with your machine, and you can always buy them, but you're going to need a presser foot on your machine, and you're going to want to make sure that the hand wheel turns relatively easy. You could always oil it and things like that, but just to make sure that your machine is working, you're also going to have a cord with it that goes into the side. I took mine out just so I could bring it over here, but you're going to want to make sure that those are with machines if you're out at like a thrift store or something like that. All right, so now you've got your machine, you figured out what you wanted, and now you need your other supplies. So with your machine, you are also going to need needles. This is Singer Universal. There's a lot of different types of needles. I'm not going to really get into it. I'm just going to recommend a universal needle for general sake. These work for pretty much everything. Now when you get into like stretchy fabrics and things like that, or specialty fabrics, you're going to need different needles, but most likely starting out, you know, sewing a scrunchie, things like that, a universal needle is going to be just fine. And they come in these little boxes like this, and I'll show you a little tip right here. They fold down and then this folds back so that you can easily grab the needle out so you're not juggling it. It took me 10 years to figure that one out. But you will need needles. Some machines do require specific needles. For the most part, especially if you're getting a more lower end machine, you're going to be able to use just general needles. These are Singer needles. There's also a few other needles out there that are pretty generic that will work in most machines, but you can always check your manual for your machine. And then also with your machine, along with a needle, you're going to need a bobbin, which is this little round thing, and this is what sews the bottom threads of your stitches. And again, this is specific to your machine. There are plastic ones and there are metal ones, and then there are different sizes of each of those. So you're going to again need to look in your manual for your specific machine on the size. They will look very similar in different sizes, but they won't work properly in your machine if you don't have the right one. And if you got your machine used, or you lost the manual, or just don't have it, don't know where it is, just Google your machine and put in manual with it. You can almost always find the manual for your machine online. Even if you have to pay for it, sometimes they're like $15, $20 to download a PDF. I highly, highly recommend getting the machine manual for your machine, even if you have to pay for it. It is going to be so useful. There's things on my machine sometimes that I don't even know how to do, and I have to look back in my manual and figure it out, or different stitches. It'll tell you how to thread it, all kinds of things. So I guess we'll add that to another thing that you need is the machine manual. All right, now moving into some of the other tools that you're gonna need. And we're gonna start out with our cutting tools. So you're gonna need a pair of scissors. Now, you could get away with just using your scissors you have at home for starting out if you don't wanna buy a pair of scissors, but if you sew a little bit more, you're gonna want a fabric specific pair of scissors. Now, these don't have to be, you don't have to go to the fabric store and buy fabric scissors. You can just go to the dollar store and buy a pair of scissors and say, I'm only going to use these for fabric. Now, if you're paying $1, $2 for them, they might not last as long and stay as sharp, but you don't have to go out and buy some super expensive scissors. These are just some basic, these are technically fabric scissors that I got at the store, but you're just going to want to only use them for fabric. Otherwise, they're going to dull and not work as well, and you want them to be nice and sharp as you cut your fabric. So again, this is something that you could upgrade to. These are like $10, $15 a piece, I think, maybe. And again, there's all kinds of different types of scissors, and we're not going to really get into that, but you're going to need a pair of scissors, or if you happen to have one, you might do other crafts. A rotary blade will work as well, as long as you have a cutting mat. And this is just a blade, and if you're going to do a lot of sewing, this is something that is almost a requirement for cutting out patterns and things like that to really speed up your sewing. So they come in different sizes again, and then you're going to also need a special cutting mat for this as well. But you may be a crafter and already have one, but again, you're probably going to want to make sure you have some new blades for that if you have been cutting paper or vinyl and things like that. So the next thing that you're going to need is you're going to need some pins. And pins, I always recommend the ball head pins, which are these ones with the little balls on them. There's some that have like little shapes, flat things like butterflies and hearts on them. Those will work too, but they are just much easier to see if you drop them. You can buy really cheaply little pins like these, and you can see just how little those are, and if you drop them in carpet or something, they are really hard to find. But I also recommend to get them a little bit longer, at least like the 1.5 inches. No, it's kind of hard to see, but pins will get you very far. You're going to need them to hold your fabric together and things like that. Now, an alternative to pins are clips, which you may have seen people talk about, and clips are amazing. They're an alternative to pins, and they're just these little plastic clips, and they go on your fabric and hold them. Now, these are great, but they won't work in every situation. Pins will work in almost every situation. Clips will not. So I recommend starting with the pins. Pins are also cheaper. And again, with the clips, there are some really nice clips, which are these. I have never had a single one break. These are the Clover Wonder clips, or you can buy a pack on Amazon for like $4 of 100 of them, but these aren't as good. So like I said, something that you could maybe upgrade to as you continue your sewing journey. There's also different sizes of the clips. These are little skinny ones for skinnier things. They also have like jumbo ones for big, heavy duty things. And then you're gonna need a marking tool. Now, this doesn't have to be fancy. This is what I use is this is a Crayola marker. I know it's black, but I just use, these are fine point Crayola markers. They're washable. I don't even buy them. I use my kids, and these are great for marking on your fabric if needed. So you're going to want something like that, because as you get into sewing, there's going to be different marks and things you're going to need. That you can buy like Taylor's chalk. This is broken, but it comes in like a little rectangle to draw on it that comes off with water. You can buy heat erasable pens. There's so many different things and different options, but you can always just start or continue using a Crayola washable marker. And then you're gonna need thread. Sometimes machines are finicky on the type of thread or brand that you use, but most of the time there's not really issues with it. I just recommend using an all-purpose thread. This is the dual duty all-purpose thread, and I have never had any issues with this. You can get it at Michael's, again, all of those craft stores, and all kinds of colors and things like that. You're typically going to want it to match the fabric that you're using the best that you can, one shade darker if possible, but any thread will do. It all sews the same, and as I said, there's all kinds of different kinds, but for starting out, and almost anything, an all-purpose thread will do it. That's what I sew with 99.9% of the time. So get yourself a spool of all-purpose thread. And then you're gonna need seam rippers. You're gonna want at least one. This is like the very cheapest, most basic seam ripper. And what it is basically, you can see it's just like a little point there there's a knife inside of this little U at the bottom there. And this is to take your seams out. Now, I know you wanna think that you're not gonna mess up, but you will. I still mess up. Seam rippers are one of the most important tools. Even there's sometimes in patterns where it's written that you have to sew something and then take the stitching out, and seam rippers will do it. There's all kinds of different ones. There's ergonomic ones, all kinds of things. This is a little bit of a nicer one, but they all do the same thing at the end of the day. And then the last thing that you're going to need is a measuring tool. And there's a couple different things. If you're sewing just like bags, scrunchies, things like that, that you don't have to take measurements on your body for, a hard ruler or tape measure is going to work just fine. This is from my Cricut, and this is just an acrylic ruler, or you could just use a basic school ruler to take your measurements. You know, if you're just cutting out a piece of fabric, this will work. And then if you are doing clothing, you are going to want a flexible tape measure. So you can buy these. These are, you know, the standard, what you see on fashion designers that wear around their neck. This is just a long, flexible tape measure that is bendable to take your measurements. And these are generally pretty cheap. You can get them at most craft stores and things like that. But you're going to want this because it's going to be accurate. Now, if you don't have one, that is okay. What you can do is, or you don't want to buy one right now, you could just take a string or ribbon, shoelace something round, and you take it around this part where you're wanting to measure and use that string and then mark it and then measure your string, and that'll work just as well. You can also buy little tape measures like this that roll up, and these are much nicer to have because they are nice and compact and you don't have this whole big snake of a thing flailing out everywhere. And this is another measuring tool, but I definitely recommend getting one. This is a steam gauge, and you can see it has little measurements on it, and then it has this little slidey thing on it. And this is to kind of help mark your seams if you're pressing to check your seam allowances and things like that. Now, those words might sound like a second language to you, but they will make more sense in the end. But these are pretty cheap as well, and definitely recommend a seam gauge. And then you're also going to want fabric for your project, which is just going to kind of be dependent on what you're doing. But most likely, like if you're making a bag, scrunchie, you know, those kind of beginner projects, you're going to just need a basic quilting cotton. And to save some money on that, don't be afraid to go to the thrift store, look for sheets or blankets, things like that. You can get a sheet, which is like 2 or 3 yards of fabric for like $2, and that is a great way to practice your sewing without having to spend money on actual fabric from the fabric store. These sheets are fabric, and I have made clothes from sheets. I've done clothes from curtains, all kinds of different things. Fabric is fabric. It doesn't matter where it comes from. So that's just one option. So those are everything that you will need. You're going to run into needing those somewhere along the line in one of your first projects. I can almost guarantee it. So you're going to want to have those tools at your disposal so that you can start. You know, you're not going to want to say, oh, I don't need a seam ripper yet, and then mess up and then have to wait until you're able to go to the store or have a seam ripper delivered to you. So get those tools in your sewing toolkit before you get started. And a few other things that I highly recommend having is an iron and an ironing board to press your fabric as you're sewing. But you can always get away without having that, and I know a lot of people have those in their homes already, or know somebody that has one, or you can go to the junk store and get one for pretty cheap, because I know a lot of people don't iron their clothes anymore. Guilty of that one. I mostly use my steamer, but I do have an iron that I do use, and I also have a small tabletop ironing board, so it is compact. You don't need a special iron. They do have mini ones, but just your normal, this is just a Black & Decker iron, will do just fine. But like I said, once you have all your tools, then the next step is to get into getting your sewing machine set up. I do already have a video on how to thread your sewing machine, and it should be able to walk you through how to thread almost any sewing machine. So once you get your tools, then you get your sewing machine threaded, then you're going to be able to get into your very first project, which is so exciting. If you have any questions about anything, feel free to leave me a comment down below. And like I said, I will put a link to everything in the description for a link on Amazon so that it is accessible to everybody. But like I said, almost everything can be found at a box store that has craft supplies. A lot of these can even be found at like a Dollar General or a Dollar Tree. They'll have little kits of sewing items. But I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'm so excited to take you along on this journey to get you into sewing. Thanks for watching. Bye.